Is this theft? Wait a minute, those kids are like family to me, and yet they're treating them like objects. Charlie, usually so cheerful and lively, showing anger for the first time, his face turning bright red with fury. Wondering if I had said something offensive, I calmly explained, "I understand how you feel, Charlie. Dogs are an important part of the family, right? But there are limitations to what we can do. We'll lodge your report for now." That's not what I'm trying to say. Man, sometimes you just don't get how people feel. I was at a loss for words, not knowing the right way to respond. What went wrong? As a police officer, I started losing confidence in myself. My name is Logan Reed. I'm a police officer. After graduating from high school, I was accepted to the police academy to become a candidate and to receive basic law enforcement training. In my state of residency, recruits reside at the academy from Monday through Friday and for 26 weeks, during which time they are required to undergo a military-style inspection every day. While at the academy, you will be expected to maintain a high level of military discipline. Ethics, teamwork, and accountability are the hallmarks of this intensive program. The academy will be one of the toughest times you will ever endure. Even for someone like me, confident in my physical strength, I remember how tough the daily running exercises were. After graduation from the academy, you will report to one of the 23 state police barracks. Your authority will be statewide and far beyond that of local and county police officers. My aspiration was to join the SWAT team, a team under the state police. While some might imagine it as a separate organization like the military, the SWAT team is actually part of local police departments, responsible for handling various critical incidents, including hostage barricades, high-risk warrant services, dignitary protection, WMD/CBRNE incidents, waterborne operations, and terrorism-related incidents. The team also regularly assists allied police departments with resolving critical incidents. This collective approach provides the state police with a team of highly trained troopers to respond to high-risk incidents beyond the capability and knowledge of other troopers. As police officers, SWAT members are empowered to apprehend individuals who engage in dangerous behavior or violate the law, particularly in the context of demonstrations. Inspired by TV dramas, I had longed to become a SWAT team member since deciding to join the police. Of course, I also had some interest in other specialized units such as criminal investigations and motorcycle unit. However, there was a reason why I aspired to be a SWAT member. Members are tasked with operating in high-risk situations and employing advanced tactics, requiring specialized training and exceptional teamwork. To qualify for selection, candidates must pass rigorous tests and training, which is no easy feat. Nevertheless, I harbored a steadfast desire to become a police officer, capable of safeguarding citizens from harm. Ever since I was a little boy, I often expressed my dream of becoming a police officer. There was someone who would gently pat my head and encourage me, saying, "You can do it." That person was my brother, Ethan. "Don't worry, you're my brother. Logan, you're definitely going to be a fine police officer, prioritizing the safety of citizens. That would make your big bro so happy," Ethan would say. His rough and large hand would ruffle my fine hair. It's true I had a strong fascination with the SWAT team, but the original reason I wanted to become a police officer was because of my brother. With an 18-year age gap between us, we might look more like father and son to outsiders. In fact, with our busy parents, Ethan often attended nursery school events for me. To me, my brother was my greatest pride. It's not unusual for young kids, especially boys, to find fire trucks and police vehicles cool, often asking their parents for picture books or toys. I was no exception, and neither were my friends. Therefore, having a brother who was a police officer and a father who was a firefighter was my greatest pride. Although that wasn't the only reason. As a child, I often asked my brother, "Big bro, I want to ride in a police car." "All right, let's go then." I remember the day when police vehicles came to town for an event. I was so thrilled that I ran around everywhere, expressing my joy. Furthermore, as part of the elementary class lesson, I was tasked with researching occupations. And without hesitation, I chose to focus on the role of a police officer, while the other kids presented based on what they read in picture books or heard from their parents. I was different. After all, My brother was an active duty police officer. I remember well how enthusiastic I was about studying this topic, asking my brother questions and talking to his colleagues. When I was 7, a life-changing event occurred that solidified my determination. I resolved to become a police officer in the future, aspiring to be someone who helps many others. I wasn't particularly adept at studying, but despite that, my mother encouraged me to excel academically. Additionally, I learned martial arts from my brother and father. I even took mixed martial arts lessons, and by the time I took the police academy exam, I was quite confident in myself. With my family's support, I was able to take my first steps towards becoming a police officer. A fresh recruit just out of training will not qualify. Expect to work patrol for 3 to 5 years before being able to get into a specialized unit like this. However, since SWAT requires physical strength, the younger you are, the better your chances. I was determined to stand out and become a SWAT member. With this thought in mind, I diligently carried out my duties each day, hoping to earn a place on the SWAT team in the following years. Then, one day, a mother reported her child missing. I immediately joined my senior officer in the police car and began searching the area. And then, I remembered a certain past event. Ethan, when I was a young child, I once got lost during dusk. I found myself alone at the unfamiliar place. Initially, I was unconsciously following an interesting lizard, but soon found myself in the middle of nowhere. I was only 7 years old at that time, so I don't believe I had ventured too far from home. But a child's perspective is different from an adult's. Feeling scared in an unknown land, I couldn't move from there. Before I knew it, the lizard I was following had disappeared, and all I saw around me were houses I didn't recognize. After some thought, I finally took action. As the rain began to fall, I didn't want to get soaked, so I began searching for somewhere to take shelter. But there were no shops nearby, and my parents had strictly instructed me not to enter someone else's house without permission. So, I kept running until I ended up at a certain chapel. The old gate was covered at the base with dull green moss, while the increasingly dark, reddish sky and the cawing of crows amplified the eerie atmosphere. I decided to seek shelter at the chapel door, but as the day turned to night, the temperature dropped rapidly, and I began to shiver from the cold. Somebody, help, big bro. Remembering my brother, who always protected me, I called his name repeatedly out of loneliness. But no one came to help. As my strength drained away, sleepiness crept over me, and my eyelids slowly began to close. I wondered if I would just wither away here, unnoticed by anyone. Even as a child, I had such thoughts. But then, faintly, I heard a man's voice, stirring my eardrums. My consciousness slowly awakened, and at the same time, I heard the sound of footsteps splashing through puddles. With the last of my strength, I slowly opened my eyes, and there was my brother. His face pale with worry. Ethan always had a nonchalant attitude, never showing weakness. Tears were absolutely out of the question for him. But there, in front of me, he had tears in his eyes, and he gently embraced me, as if carefully picking up a cracked vase. Thank goodness, thank goodness. Why are you here? Do you have any idea how worried I was? I shivered at my brother's intensity. He was someone who never referred to himself as I in front of me, and always seemed composed. No matter what. But on this day, he was different. Police officers have to be mindful of their appearance to earn the trust of citizens. This was Ethan's mantra, always conscious of his appearance. But the brother before me now was in a state I couldn't have imagined. His hair was disheveled, and his clothes were muddy and soaked, probably because he hadn't used an umbrella. His breathing was ragged, and his expression was far from the gentle brother I knew, more like a wrathful deity. It was then that I finally realized he was angry. Big bro, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Trembling, I finally managed to utter words of apology. I hated the thought of diminishing my brother's dignity because of me, and yet, I was a bad child. As I apologized repeatedly in my mind, my brother looked at me with his usual kind eyes and said, "Sorry, I went too far. I was worried about you, Logan. You didn't come home, and when I was searching, I found one of your shoes by the roadside." I was imagining the worst-case scenarios. Honestly, I couldn't stop shaking. Then, I realized that my brother's body was trembling more than mine. Thankfully, I was rescued by Ethan and taken to the hospital, though I was okay. After that, I got a serious scolding from our parents, but this incident solidified my desire to become a police officer. 15 years since then, I worked hard and fulfilled my dream. Hey, if you have the luxury to think about other things, pay more attention to your surroundings. Oh yes. Sorry. Snapped back to reality. Right, I'm currently searching for a missing child with my partner. As I refocused and regretted letting my mind wander, I noticed a young boy playing with a ball in a park. I found him. Jerry matches the description given by the mother. I'll check the surrounding area for safety. You secure the boy. Following my partner's instructions, I approached and spoke to the child. He looked at me with clear eyes. Are you a policeman, sir? Yes, that's right. Do you know where your mom is? Where's mommy? Realizing his mother was missing, the boy started looking around, tears welling up in his eyes. I immediately told him that his mother was looking for him and waiting at the police station. I informed my partner, and then the mother confirmed that this was the missing child. Hearing his mother's voice over the phone seemed to comfort the boy. By the time we were in the police car, he fell asleep in my arms, breathing regularly. Thus, the child was safely returned to his mother, and I was soon busy with paperwork and reports. The calls to the station never stopped. While some were genuinely in trouble, many were due to minor accidents or misunderstandings by the elderly. Really? Claiming a burglary just because you lost your glasses, but they were on your head all along. Well, Mr. Smith lives alone. His call also serves as a check on his well-being. This is the 6th time this month. Huh? Senior said with a weary face, so all I could do was give a wry smile and reply, indeed. My days pass by quickly like this. I'm not yet a SWAT team member, but I'm starting to think that being a patrol officer isn't too bad. Of course, I still want to join the SWAT team, but I find a close interaction with the community in my current duty quite appealing. Besides, while my partner can be blunt and careless, our ideals align. His instructions are precise, and he's very reliable in a pinch. Perhaps in this comfortable environment, I gradually lost some of my sense of urgency and empathy, little realizing that this would lead to something significant. That day, I was on patrol with my partner. During our rounds, we received a radio call requesting backup. Such calls are common, so my partner simply acknowledged with a "got it" and stepped on the gas. Arriving at the scene with my senior officer, we found other officers already there, taking statements. The victim was a proprietor who breeds animals. He alleged that the theft had broken into his property on a day when the business was closed and some of his belongings were stolen. Additionally, today, as he discovered the damages and reported to the police, the suspected theft, who was wearing a hood and mask, returned and abducted his pet dogs. It was then that I unexpectedly reunited with an old friend, Charlie Williams. Cut it beat Charlie. Logan, you always talked about being a cop. You really made your dream come true, huh? I never expected that my childhood friend, whom I'd known since elementary and high school, would be the victim this time. Charlie always loved dogs, and now, as a dog breeder, that much was clear without question. However, it was unfortunate that he had fallen victim to such a crime. I wanted to identify the culprit and return his pet dogs as soon as possible. Focused on handling the situation, Charlie mentioned something else. Actually, it's not just my dog that was taken, but also dogs with breed certificates. I was supposed to train them for adoption. I think the thief was after money. Can't we report them as missing persons? I understood his desire to find his beloved family members. We often receive reports about lost pets, so it's natural for owners to express such sentiments. But legally, dogs are considered personal property, not missing persons. In this case, it's treated as a legal entry and property damage, and the abducted dogs are victims of theft. Is this theft? Wait a minute, those dogs are like family to me. Treating them like mere objects, that's just not right. Charlie, usually so cheerful and lively, now showed his anger, his face turning bright red. I must have said something upsetting, so I calmly explained. I understand how you feel, Charlie. Dogs are an important part of the family, right? But there are limitations to what we can do. We'll lodge your report for now. That's not what I'm trying to say. Man, sometimes you just don't get how people feel. Well, Your realism is probably what makes you a good cop. I was at a loss for words, only managing to furrow my brow in confusion. Then, my partner, seeing this, stepped in and apologized to Charlie. I'm sorry for my partner's lack of tact. We'll take responsibility for searching and rescuing Coco and the other dogs. There might be aspects of the procedure you don't agree with, but please cooperate with us to ensure their quick rescue. Okay, Charlie responded, clearly not fully convinced, but understanding that nothing could be done without completing the paperwork. Back at the police car, I got a scolding from my partner. Your approach was inappropriate. While what you said may have been technically correct, pet owners like Mr. Williams view Coco and the other dogs as beloved family members. Merely stating facts doesn't consider the emotional attachment involved. His words made me realize my mistake. I had been solely focused on completing the task at hand, without considering Charlie's emotional impact. I'm sorry, you're right. Yeah, next time, understand the other person's perspective before acting. After such conversations, the atmosphere in the car was enveloped in an unusual silence. Some time later, we got a report that the perpetrator had turned herself in. It seems to be a woman Charlie knew, my partner explained. I recognized her too. In our first year of high school, Charlie dated a girl who was a senior. It turned out she was the culprit. Her motive was to trouble Charlie. Initially, they got along well, but she neglected her studies for Charlie, leading him to break up with her out of concern. Unfortunately, she failed to get into her first choice of college, so she opted to get a job, and they lost touch. The exact reason for her harassment now was unclear, but according to my partner, since a crime had been committed, she would be prosecuted, as Charlie was informed. Her statement indicated that she had planned to maintain her normal daily activities to cover up her crime and observe Charlie's reaction, not expecting him to report her to the police. I just wanted to tell Charlie that I still cared. I never imagined it would be a crime, she said. Basically, it was a test of love. She assumed Charlie would apologize and they would reconcile. It was a crime born out of such a delusion. Of course, for Charlie, reporting to the police was the only option. Scared that things had escalated too much, she turned herself in. Although we wouldn't be handling the future procedures, I couldn't stop worrying about Charlie. This concern even started affecting my work. I made typos I usually wouldn't, got lost during patrols. Seeing me like this, my partner sighed deeply and said, "Listen, I can't be lenient. If a critical incident happens, I have to prioritize the situation. Understand? Stop sighing. Is this about the mishap with Charlie? If he's your friend, just call and sort it out." So, I decided to call Charlie. We hadn't really spoken since he started working after high school. I didn't want our friendship to end over this. Not just for work, but because he was an important childhood friend. I dialed, my hand trembling. After a few rings, Charlie answered. I apologized. I'm really sorry for making you feel bad due to my inappropriate actions. My partner reprimanded me too. I was completely wrong. I'm sorry for hurting you. After a few seconds, Charlie replied, "No, you did nothing wrong." I panicked and said those things. "You were trying to help Coco and the others, right? And I was just thinking about myself. So, stop apologizing." Though it was just a call, I could sense Charlie was smiling. That finally eased my heart. We reconciled. Hanging up and about to return, my partner yelled at me. We had to rush to a scene. Apparently, there was a small fire at a nearby eatery. The fire wasn't widespread and was now extinguished, but a key suspect had fled. Then the radio crackled again. A report of a fire at a shopping mall just 5 minutes away by car. Man, what's going on today? It's the dry season. Fire prevention posters are everywhere. Surely it's not the same culprit in a row. That would be a disaster. My partner looked unusually serious. I also felt an unprecedented tension but managed to stay grounded. We were instructed to head to the scene of the recent report without delay. We got into the police car and were en route, but my partner unexpectedly turned on the blinker to make a left turn, straying from our intended path. The reason became clear immediately after turning. That guy, he's been glancing at us repeatedly, my partner noted. We were informed that the fire had been contained and local officers were handling it, so we were driving without the siren. However, while driving, My partner had been keeping an eye on a car ahead. I too had noticed the driver's odd behavior, but we have a standing order to head to the fire scene. Despite the said order, my partner decided to follow the suspicious driver. We kept a couple of cars in between to avoid detection, but every time we stopped at a red light, the driver of that car kept checking the rearview mirror. Eventually, the driver stopped using turn signals, which heightened our suspicion to alarming levels. He's definitely aware of the police presence. We could keep following, but he's clearly trying to shake us off, I added. The suspect's car began to speed up once realizing we were following. Despite repeated warnings to stop, the driver ignored them and sped off, initiating a car chase. The suspect is disregarding traffic signals and exceeding the speed limit to an extreme extent. At this point, my partner became highly concerned about road safety and decided to abandon the reckless chase, appearing frustrated. Then, a piercing siren sounded, and a motorcycle officer zoomed past us. Dressed in a khaki uniform, mounted on a stark black bike. Yes, it was a motorcycle officer from the State Police Motor Unit. The officer glanced at us briefly, raised his right hand in acknowledgement, and then took off at full throttle in pursuit of the suspect. Seeing this, my senior let out a dry laugh. That's lightning fast. No worries, we're heading to our scene, and made a U-turn. Triggered by my senior's muttering, all I could do was stare blankly at the rapidly receding motorcycle officer. Upon our arrival at the scene, we received a report that a suspect had already been apprehended. Apparently, they had been smoking, forgotten to extinguish their cigarette, and upon returning found a fire had grown, prompting a panic call to emergency services. It wasn't a case of arson. Instead, it was caused by negligence. The officers who had already arrived were conducting their investigations, ruling out any criminal intent. Then, over the radio, we got the update. The suspect from the earlier scene had been caught. It was the motorcycle officer from the State Police Motor Unit who had apprehended them, and the suspect had already confessed. This too seemed to be unintentional. The guy was a kitchen assistant at a restaurant. While everyone else was on break, he dozed off in a corner of the kitchen, forgetting about the fire he'd started. When he noticed the fire, he tried to smother it with a dry cloth, which naturally caught fire, and he panicked and fled. That was the guy I was chasing. Well, looks like both cases are accidents with no criminal intent, but he'll face charges for not following traffic rules and ignoring police orders. He sighed, seemingly disappointed in his own driving skills under the most stressful emergency conditions, mentioning he needed to aim higher. From my perspective, my partner's driving skills are impressive for someone in their 20s. After our shift ended and I headed home, I noticed someone standing in front of my house. I tensed up instinctively, but relaxed upon hearing the voice. Hey, long time no see. It was my brother. Big bro. What are you doing here? I hadn't seen him since he was reassigned to an area far from my place, and we'd only been in touch through emails and phone calls. So, it had been a while since we last saw each other, but recently he had returned to the area. He wanted to see me, so he made an impromptu visit to my apartment. As police officers, we might be called on even on our days off, so we opted for juice instead of alcohol to celebrate our reunion. Still, it's been a long time since we met. How did you recognize me so easily? He asked. Of course, I would recognize my brother, who I adore. How could I possibly mistake you? I replied. Despite the years that had passed since we last met, my brother looked almost unchanged, perhaps due to his daily training regimen. As I pondered this, he smiled. Can't believe how much you've grown, Logan. Your big bro was quite surprised to see how big you've become. He patted my head just like he used to. Honestly, I felt a mix of embarrassment for being treated like a kid and a desire for my brother's attention. To hide these mixed feelings, I shook my head and asked him directly, "Why did you come back here? If you had told me, I would have come to see you right away." He took a gulp of his grape juice and began explaining. I was doing VIP protection for a while, and that kept me pretty busy, moving between different departments. I even got involved in investigating serious crimes. The main reason I came back is a shortage of manpower here. I'm 40 now, not so young anymore. Part of it was making way for the younger generation, for promising young officers like you. He smiled warmly, narrowing his eyes. He mentioned that he was now with the State Police Motor Unit. At that moment, I remembered the incident from earlier in the day. The motorcycle officer who was described as incredibly fast must have been a member of the State Police Motor Unit as well. Curious if my brother knew anything, I casually asked him about it. He seemed surprised for a moment but then chuckled, as fast as a deity. Huh? Even so, we're all just cops. Do you want to be like that? Godspeed. I felt the urge to nod, but slowly shook my head. It was cool, but I want to be in the SWAT team. I have my strengths, and Godspeed has theirs. They're not comparable. Not that I could compare myself to them anyway. I said this somewhat self-deprecatingly, and my brother smiled sadly for a moment. Then, life returned to its usual routine. Again, we received a familiar call, and my senior sighed. It's Mr. Smith again. While calming my senior's faraway look, we advised him about his glasses, as usual. Heading home after our shift, I spotted a brown dog walking at the edge of the road. It was winter, and the sun had already set, casting shadows in the dimming light. If it had been a child, I would have immediately protected them, but with a dog. Recalling Charlie's words, I cautiously approached the dog. He always loved dogs and used to read books about them, even teaching me about canine behavior. Carefully not to startle the dog, I turned my back slightly and extended my hand. The dog wore a collar, so it's likely a pet. It cautiously approached, sniffed my hand, and relaxed, nuzzling against my leg. I quickly checked the collar and found a name and phone number. Coco. Wait, could it be? Though I had a hunch, I dialed the number from the collar. Sure enough, the display showed the name Charlie. Coco, you little rascal, escaped again after all that's happened. You shouldn't worry your owner so much. Coco just responded by nuzzling closer with a soft whine. Because of Coco's friendly demeanor, Charlie's ex-girlfriend was spared from a single scratch when she took it from Charlie's place. Charlie soon answered the phone. Sorry, Logan. Got a bit of a situation here. It's about Coco, right? I've got him. Come to the first park near the town hall. After explaining the situation, Charlie, surprised yet grateful, hurriedly arrived with a little boy in tears. I recognized the child. He was the boy who had gotten separated from his mother that time. While walking, Coco bolted. I noticed the leash wasn't properly attached. Oh, this is my son. Say hello, would you? The boy looked up at me with round eyes and then greeted me politely. Big brother, you helped us again. Again. Oh, well, you see. Charlie explained the situation. It turned out that the boy's mother was Charlie's wife. I had no idea of the connection. Man, I seem to keep relying on you lately. Thanks for rescuing my son and Coco. That's a real cop for you, always protecting the citizens. Cut it out. I scratched my cheek, embarrassed, and squatted down to meet the boy's eyes. Patting his head, I said, You can't let Coco out of your sight, okay? As his owner, you're all he has. He's part of the family, so make sure you stick together from now on. And don't forget to check his leash, okay? The boy nodded vigorously and replied, Yes. Well, I guess that's it for now. Hold on, wait a minute. If it's okay with you, I'd like to hang out a bit longer. After ensuring Coco and his son were safely home with his wife, Charlie and I headed out to the city center. Knowing I didn't drink, Charlie considerately ordered non-alcoholic cocktails for both of us. After a brief silence, Charlie slowly shared his thoughts. I'm thinking of becoming a cop. I was so surprised by Charlie's revelation that I almost spit out my drink, but managed to compose myself and asked him why. It turns out that after his ex-girlfriend's obsession had caused him harm, Charlie had been harshly self-critical for being unable to do anything at the time. He still felt bad about snapping at me, even though what I had said was all true. No, it's partly my fault too. I'd become too complacent with my environment, losing touch with the concerns of citizens. I was soaking in lukewarm water, so to speak. Let's just call it even and forget it, okay? As I said this, Charlie's eyes moistened. Then, a large man sat down beside us. Reflexively, I turned to see my smiling brother, Ethan. Long time no see, Charlie, he said, patting Charlie's head like in the old days. Charlie chuckled, a bit ticklish yet visibly happy, and replied with a smile, Ethan, long time no see. It turns out Ethan had seen us entering the place and decided to follow. Last I heard, you got married and had a kid. Where's the crybaby Charlie gone, huh? Well, that's great. Ethan teased, making Charlie blush. I didn't contact you because I thought you'd be busy. Charlie had always looked up to my brother. Not in a weird way but as an admiration. Like when I was a lost child saved by Ethan, Charlie had also been helped by him. Charlie's family had been poor, raised by his mother alone. At school events like the sports festival, Charlie was always alone, until Ethan reached out and invited him to our home. I remember Ethan running as a parent substitute in the relay race. That time, the anchor runners were you and Dad, right? Yay, Dad and I sprinted so hard it made the kids laugh. It became an annual thing. While we were sharing these memories, Charlie took a deep breath and said, I saw you the other day, Ethan, on a motorcycle, guiding the criminal into a dead end while choosing routes with fewer cars and pedestrians. Ethan and I were both surprised by this revelation, though probably for different reasons. Wait, where did you hear that? Well, my father-in-law is a high-ranking police officer. I see. Ethan laughed, ruffling Charlie's hair again. I was amazed to learn that Ethan, the Godspeed, had been my brother all along. He intended to keep it a secret, but now that it was out, he admitted to consistently being among the top 3 in the state motorcycle officer competition. So, why are you here in a local unit if you're that good? Didn't I tell you? I want to be a guide for the younger officers, not a stumbling block for them. That's all, Ethan replied, sipping his drink. Charlie looked at Ethan with admiration. Then, he spoke slowly. I've always admired you and Logan. My wife and I have already discussed it, and I've made up my mind. One day, I'll be a great cop, standing shoulder to shoulder with you both. Ethan put his hand on Charlie's shoulder, and we all clinked our glasses together, smiling. Charlie and I eventually became partners in the SWAT team, but that's a story for a few years down the line.